Welcome, everybody, to the Leadership HMN podcast. I'm your host, Edwin Medina, and I'm joined with the lead consultant at the Academy of Professional Engagement and co founder of Yama Health, Philip Alexander Cunningham. What is going on, Phil?
Man, it is good, man. It's great to be back. It's been a while. I know that the people have been asking you when we were going to come back with some new stuff, so I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, so new stuff is, man, we actually recently did a poll on LinkedIn where we asked their members, where do they see leaders actually struggle the most? And it was a resounding 64% came back with ego.
Mm.
I thought that was crazy. So initial thoughts, I see your reaction. Initial thoughts when you hear the word ego, what comes to your mind?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think that initially most people think about ego as like this negative thing, right? But in reality, from my perspective, ego is almost like your internal sense of self, is how you think of yourself beyond what everybody else thinks of you, right? But on the other side of that, most people think of ego as like the person who is just like super crazy. They have a false sense of whoever it is that they are. They think that they can do more than they actually can, and they probably treat people poorly, right? But if I were to begin to define what ego means to me, and also what it looks like healthily inside of leadership, is actually just having a strong sense of who you are, even when the environment around you doesn't align with what it is that you are looking to be internally. So it's super interesting to be able to think about what this idea of ego is. But what does it mean to you?
So, so from a psychoanalysis standpoint, I definitely agree with you. So regardless of what definition you look at, it's tied to your self-esteem, which leads me to believe that ego has to be a good thing, right?
Yeah,
Because if you have, I mean, if you have high self-esteem, which is that's what everybody wants, want high
yeah,
self-esteem, your ego is feeding that, right?
indeed.
So it makes me think, like Dion, he was he was getting interviewed, right? And
Yep.
and Dion has this bit where he says, "Don't let my confidence reaffirm your insecurities,"
Yes.
right? And it sounds like a pig-headed, egotistical thing to say, right? But
Hmm.
if Dion's confidence comes in the sense of he's the greatest cornerback of all time, but then his production showed that he is the greatest quarterback of all time, is he egotistical? And then I think the most famous one is Napoleon. Everyone's all like, "Oh, you got," that's where the whole short
Yep.
guy syndrome comes from.
Yep.
However, if Napoleon put in the work to become the best military strategist of all time,
Yes.
and his actions
Arguably.
reflect that, his
Hmm.
accolades, his victories reflect all that. Is Napoleon really egotistical, or is he just sure of himself that he knows what he brings to the table?
Yeah.
So that's the conundrum, and I think the only time I think it rubs people the wrong way, or that it rubs me the wrong way, I don't know. You could answer this too, is when the accents are off. So if I think something that I'm not, if I think I'm something that my character doesn't reflect or that my actions don't reflect, then that's where
Yeah.
I think like it starts butting heads and they're like, oh, Edmund's egotistical.
Yeah. I'm 100% with you. Because ego is one of those parts of yourself that is very fragile. And I'm not saying that it's easily crushed. I'm saying that with too much or too little, it can impact your performance overall, right? Because those folks who are egotistical enough to think that they can change the world, and they put in the work to actually change the world or to be the best at whatever it is that they're looking to do, they usually can get to that path. But they start in a space where they believe long before their actions show that they can
Absolutely.
be that person, right? Or they have that particular ability, right? So even if you go back to like Dion's, just to stick with Dion, right? Before he was considered the greatest cornerback of all times, he believed that he was the greatest cornerback of all times. Because when he showed up at draft day, he said, I'm gonna look good, I'm gonna feel good, and when I feel good, I play good. And when I play good, they pay good, right? He's been following that from the beginning. Everybody else thought that was egotistical, but he was literally speaking into existence what he felt like his future was, but then he went and put in the work. I think the difference
Absolutely.
is though, is that when you continue to add so much ego and you don't put in the work, right? Then you find yourself almost in a space of, so not only is it arrogance, but you're almost, I'm trying to think of what the right word is for this. You're kind of crazy if you're just,
Yeah.
if you think that you are, if you think that you are something that you are not, and you're not willing to put in the work or haven't even taken the steps to put in the work, you are yeah, I mean, you're
Yeah,
kind of
you
crazy. Yeah.
you went with crazy. I was
Delusional.
Yeah,
That's
I
the
was gonna
word.
fill in the blank with delusional. Like
Yeah.
you're a bit delusional. So
Yeah.
I like what you said there, and it's funny. I got this Muhammad Ali tee on, and Muhammad Ali did the same thing. So he's in an interview he said I started telling people I was the greatest before I even was. You know
100%.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So is it egotistical, or are you just manifesting and speaking into existence? What deep down inside you're capable of becoming.
Yeah. I'm a huge believer in the idea of manifesting what your future looks like, right? And we've talked a lot about this just personally about, if we were to just to live by the statistics that exist inside of our lives, we wouldn't be who we are today, right? But here's the hard part about leadership and also not existing inside of sports. Sports is one of those spaces where it's very unique, where you can go in and you can say that I will be who it is that I say that I am and prove that, right? But if you were to show up in corporate America and say that I'm the greatest CEO that ever lived and this is my internship, right? It's going to create more blockers for you. So sometimes you have to feed your ego and see the things in front of you, but create a space for you to be able to speak those things out that may not be public facing, because public facing affirmation of yourself, and this is unfortunate, but public facing affirmation of yourself in some environments will be considered detrimental, not only to your career, but also to like the relationships that you're able to build in specific environments. And so I think it's super interesting to even see how that shows up in different demographics. Because when you see a very confident minority man show up inside corporate space and they say what it is that they are going to do, and then they do what it is that they're going to do, sometimes they create more detractors than they do fans. And
Yep.
so it's a very interesting space and a very delicate space to be able to navigate, especially when you are in a leadership role inside of work or even inside of your regular life.
Yep. Absolutely. So you could love them or hate them. I'm not making a love. I'm not making a political statement here,
Yeah,
but like 10 years ago, I read The Art of the Deal. By Donald Trump.
indeed.
And he was synonymous, and he just flat out said, he said, whether my hotels were there yet or not, I just kept telling him it's the most beautiful hotel you'll ever stay at, over and
Yeah,
over again. And he said he would just repeat it over and over again. And eventually, not only did they become the most beautiful hotels, he said it sank in people's mind. He said whether it was a great hotel or not, they thought anytime they thought of Trump hotels, they thought this is the most extravagant hotel I've ever stayed at.
100%.
It is not
100%.
necessarily egotistical. The dude's just saying, I'm gonna build hotels. They're gonna be great hotels, and I'm gonna tell people they're gonna be great hotels until they get to the point to where they are great
Correct.
hotels. so,
Correct.
so in regards to success, like having that success, we talked about like manifesting all that into existence, and it's not a bad thing. So you've accomplished a lot, man. You built a good consulting firm. You built a healthcare platform, to help African Americans find African American doctors. It's super dope. And most recently, you got a children's book coming, not coming out. It's already out. You're already on your second printing. So was there a time along your journey where you felt ego either hurt you or it actually helped you?
Oh my gosh. So it's been both, right? It's interesting because I think initially in my career, I had a very overblown ego, right? Because I had some successes early that allowed me to develop a level of confidence that didn't go along with where I was at the particular moment, right? And I remember the first time I was given a management role, not given, I like earned a management
Yeah, yeah.
role. And I had gotten to this position and I thought that I had made it, right? And then my ego turned way up. And what that did is it actually put me in a space where I thought that I had all the answers. Not only did I have to have all the answers, that I had all the answers. And I didn't have to listen to anybody, and that I didn't like accept feedback. I thought that every answer that existed already existed inside of me, and I didn't need to listen to anyone else, which from like a leadership standpoint put a tremendous amount of pressure on me, because then I didn't like, once you set that standard of like I got the answers, people will leave you alone with your ego long enough for you to just go and mess it up, right? So I remember a bunch of times where I would run meetings with my team. I'm thinking I'm laying out this outstanding plan, not really understanding the lay of the land, and my ego wouldn't allow me to like look at the situation as information. My ego would only see it as the best way for me to talk about how brilliant I was inside of this particular moment. I failed miserably, right? And fortunately, this was not a public, like a huge public facing role, or even like a really, really, really big job. It was like my first opportunity to just lead people, and to fail miserably in that space taught me how to not lead from a space of ego only, right? And when I say ego only, because you need, as a leader, you need enough ego to believe that the ideas that you have and the information that you have and the decisions that you make are the best decisions, right? Because you have to see it before everybody else does as a leader. And you also have to take responsibility before everybody else does as the leader. You have to live and die with the decisions that you make as a leader. That takes a certain amount of ego or sense of self in order to make those types of decisions. But when your ego gets to a space where it's over conflated and you don't look at the situation as information, you look at the situation as an opportunity for glory or an opportunity to be able to just drive your own self-interest, that's when you start to lose. And that's where you see so many people fall from the idea that I am the exception. Sometimes like your idea of ego or your sense of self creates this thought that you are the exception beyond
Yep.
everything else, right? So then you find people like making really horrible decisions, knowing that the information says something different, right? Or you find people leaning heavily into their own perspective or ideas, even though their own perspective or ideas have already said that that is the wrong decision to make. Or they've seen people in the past make the same decision and they decide to make the same decision because they think that they are special, right? And so it's important for you to be able to check your ego enough, or have people in your life who can check your ego enough. Because this ego is it's a tricky thing, right? Because you get a couple wins and you get consistently start to win. There is nothing to say that what the next thing that you do isn't going to work. And so you need more people around you who are able to say, well, have you thought about it like this? And it's not to say that you can't do it. It's just to say that you have to look at this through reality, the lens of reality, while also seeing the vision that you have in front of you. And how do you navigate both of those in order to be able to get the most out of everything? And let me go a little bit further, right? I have never wrote a children's book in my life, right? But it takes a certain amount of sense of self to be like, I'm going to
Oh,
do this,
absolutely.
and then actually go and do it, right? And then learn enough to be able to say, you know what, I will actually go and do it again. There's a level of ego that had to exist inside of me, or a sense of self to exist inside of me to make that particular decision and then follow it through. Now, it would have been silly for me to go out and just write something without the expertise of others who have already done this in the past. That I think is one of the things that has taught me in life, is that it's important to understand yourself, but it's also important to understand the experts in the space who they can give you information so that you can make the best decision for the thing that is going forward.
Oh, totally agree. Totally
Yeah. What
agree.
about you?
So, so for me, I'm gonna piggyback off what you said a little bit. So, in regards to being able to check your ego. So I worked at a previous company, a previous manufacturing company, and one of their principles was actually check your ego at the door,
Mm,
right? So, and I get it. I, and I think that was the governance for saying in a subliminal way, check your unhealthy ego at the door. Like we still want
100%.
you to bring what you bring to the table, but to your point, don't let it hinder the process of us being successful, like as a company or like accomplishing what we need to.
Yeah.
And every leader that I worked for that was egotistical in a negative way did everything you said. They killed the entire vibe. It was their way or the highway. We had to follow their plan. And man, that kills the culture of the team. It kills the development of those people. Like I think people don't realize the negative impact that actually has. And I think to your point, you need people um, that are going to bring you back down to reality to say, hey, you're great, but it doesn't mean we got to dismiss all these other ideas that might be better than the one that you have.
Right. Yeah.
So like in that sense, I 100% agree, man. Ego, and I mean like ego at its highest level that I saw actually work in a good way was from my sergeant major when we deployed to Iraq.
Mm.
Sergeant Major Klein. From an egotistical standpoint, you could not tell Sergeant Major Klein that he was not the epitome of the leadership value of duty. He
Yeah.
believed it. He acted in it like he really was like the walking definition of it, and you knew about
Okay.
it. You knew about it. And man, when we got over there, and a lot of people thought he was just a tough individual, and he was being tough because we're deployed, we're in Iraq, we're in a war, and he feels like that's the way he has to lead. Like, no, this dude is duty. He
Yeah.
lets you know that he's a walking example of duty, and the success that created for the individuals that are around him were tremendous. Like I was the gunner for his vehicle, and then what I started to realize is that his sense of duty and his ego started like building up, yeah, inside of
Yes.
me, and I was all like, man, like I'm like that. Like I am duty. Like I am going out on this QRF call because I was built for this. And
Yes.
that would have never happened without Sergeant Major Klein like instilling that, like rubbing off on me. Like he didn't even like have any conversations to me like, oh, you gotta like. It was never anything like that. Man, his aura,
Yes.
like his ego fed into my ego, and we were both like, we're about this life,
Yes. Yes.
and we're gonna get the job done. So
Yes.
so from that standpoint, man, I think it could also have a tremendous positive effect if it's done in the right way.
Yeah. So to piggyback off of that, that idea of sense of self actually ignites, it gives other people permission to acknowledge their own sense of self, right? And that's really where great leadership starts, is that where you set the standard. And it takes ego to set the standard, because if nobody around here is going to make a decision, if nobody around here is going to set the standard and say, this is the way that we're going to go, your ego has to kick in and say, this is the way that we are going to go. I know you didn't ask me. I'm telling you, this is the way that we are going to go. And by me saying that, and by me doing this and walking in this particular space, I'm also creating a culture or giving everybody else the permission to be the same way, right? This is when ego works the best, is when
Absolutely.
you create an environment that allows you to show up as your best. And that also creates an environment where everybody else not only should, but will show up as their best. Here's where it becomes an issue, is when your ego tries to kill the ego of other people around you, right?
Exactly.
You need a bunch of people who are like that in the situations that are life or death, right? You need it. If not, something bad is going to happen. Something bad may already be happening. So you need everybody to be like that. You need to give everybody permission to be like that consistently. And so, from my perspective, you see that show up on really great teams in sports. You see that show up on really great teams inside of like sales organizations, inside of like, there's certain, when you think about this, inside of every organization, because this is going to go on LinkedIn, right? Inside of every organization, there's always that one team that everybody wants to be on. And there's that one leader that leads that team that either everybody loves or everybody hates, right? And the people who hate them are probably people who are like, who feel like they don't have the agency to live out with their ego or sense of self the way that person does, unapologetically,
Exactly.
in whatever situation that
Exactly.
is. And so it's so interesting to exist inside of different spaces where you see people show up and they have a healthy amount of ego where they're like, I'm really good at this and I'll continue to be really good at this whether you like it or not. And that decision is yours, not mine, because I already know who I am. The other part, though, is that to develop your ego, you have to go through things, right? You have to pay the cost to actually develop a strong sense of self. And I don't think too many people get that, is that the hardships sometimes are here to drive out. Well, it's two things: to drive out the bad habits or drive out the insecurities that you have, but it's also to allow you to rise to the occasion. And when you consistently rise to the occasion, you develop a certain amount of ego. And I'll continue to say ego and sense of self because I want people to feel like they can have a strong sense of self without the negative connotation that goes along with ego. But we need to transfer the language of ego into this is actually a good thing in some situations. In most situations, you want to be the person who people count on because you have a strong sense of who it is that you are and your abilities, because you've earned the right to do that and earned the right to say that because time after time after time, you've delivered. So yeah, that's my thoughts on ego in that particular space. That's so interesting though.
No, that's dope. And last words I'll say, what you spoke about, and obviously I always go back to the military like analogies, is the sense of I don't know if it's hope, but the sense of belief that we're actually going to go accomplish this because of this egotistical leader, because they have such belief within themselves of I'm self-aware of what I'm capable of doing, that the team believes that this individual is self-aware of taking us there, that they also get the residual effect of I'm also capable of helping us get us there because of this individual. And like on the battlefield, when Napoleon's out there, French army ain't worried about nothing. We have Napoleon. You want to conquer the world? Alexander the Great. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? They didn't go into battles thinking like, oh, this one's gonna be a tough one. It was like, man, we got Alexander the Great. We're gonna be all right. And they fought harder and they believed in the fact that they can conquer the world because of Alexander the Great. But it took that individual to be self-aware enough to communicate, I'm capable of taking you there.
Yeah.
Come with me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's interesting. So recently we've been able to do some pretty cool things with Yama. And I realized that even in some of the partnerships that I've been able to develop, that I do have a strong sense of self, a strong ego, right? Because there are moments where I'm like, here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to do it. And people are looking at me like, really? Like, you really think that we can do that? And I'm like, yes. Like, there's not a thought in my mind that says that we can't raise this amount of money, or there's not a thought in my mind that says that we can't serve this many people. Like I'm just like, all we have to do, and it's not just all we have to do, it's a tremendous amount of work that goes along with it. But I've already made my mind up that there's a path to get there and that together we can get there. What that does for other people when they start to see that the path to get there is not impossible, I'm not even gonna say difficult, it's just not impossible. And that if we just every day get up, do the things that it takes to get us to that space, that not only will you get there, you're going to get there and be like, okay, there's a space further than that I want to go, but I've already developed the confidence, the sense of self, the ego to be able to go through that journey, right? I have seen people who have partnered with me on Yama begin to believe in themselves in a completely different way. And that's initially they probably looked at me as like just an egotistical dude who had a crazy idea, but now they're starting to look at it as like, this guy really believes in the idea of what it is that he's doing. I've also had to fight my own battle with sense of self, right? Especially as it relates to advertising the work that we do every day, whether that's with Yama, whether that's with a book, whether that's with a business. This is something that all entrepreneurs and leaders go through, is the idea of am I just being too self-promotional with this particular piece? And you're fighting your own sense of self and your own idea of what ego is because you don't want to show up as that person that that is considering everything that they do to be greater than what everybody else does. But sometimes you have to get to a point where you believe in your idea enough that you will put it out into the world no matter how anybody else feels about it, because there's a certain group of people who need what it is that you have.
Absolutely.
And from that, you develop this ego. And it's not about everybody else. It's about you just following the vision that you have in your mind, and you know that you can go and get the thing that you said is in your head. And that takes a certain amount of ego. That takes you saying, it makes other people uncomfortable when you say, this is what we're going to do, and you're not going to stand in my way to go get that thing. So,
absolutely. That's
yeah.
dope. Yeah,
Yeah.
I 100% agree. So for all the viewers, we'll just leave you with this. When it comes to ego, just ask yourself, are you casting a vote for healthy ego, or are you casting a vote for unhealthy ego?
100%.
Absolutely. So as always, thanks, Phil, for your time. Greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you got kids, man, nieces and nephews on the way, man, check out Phil's book, man. The link's going to be in the description.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Take care.